So one hot topic thus far for 2021 has been, stop me if you've heard this before, a Nintendo Switch Pro or a Nintendo Switch Revision, a new Nintendo Switch console potentially coming in the year of 2021. It feels like we've been talking about this forever. Of course, analysts started off this year by saying, yes, a Nintendo Switch Revision, a Nintendo Switch Pro is coming. Will it be called a Nintendo Switch Pro? Probably not. It's just kind of easy to call that for now because Nintendo will probably call it something, well, just absolutely ridiculous. Of course, yesterday we touched on the subject in that ridiculous Nintendo Direct leak that was clearly fake. I just wanted to make fun of it with you guys because I thought it was so ridiculous how so many people were putting stock into this. But one thing that's been consistent with this Nintendo Switch Revision, this Nintendo Switch Pro stuff, has been really the lack of proof. There's been lots of speculation. There's been lots of inside information, lots of piecing things together that we of course have done on this channel. But as far as actual concrete proof of the system itself, we haven't had anything like that until last night, because a very interesting discovery was made by a data miner about the Nintendo Switch within the firmware. And now because of this, this is potentially the first proof of a Nintendo Switch Pro or a Nintendo Switch Revision coming out potentially in 2021. RGT, everyone's already talked about this. Spawnwave already made a video. There's already hundreds of videos. What took you so long? Look, I was hanging out with my grandma this morning. We had an early lunch. We did some errands together. So you should like this video simply for the fact that I'm a family man and I was hanging out with my grandma. So share this video around and you know, make it do good. But anyways, let's get into this information because there's a lot of stuff to uncover with this, and I basically just want to share my thoughts with it. So this information is coming to us from a data miner by the name of Series M. I believe that's how you say it. If I'm saying it incorrectly, I apologize in advance. But Series M has been around the data mining scene for a very long time. They've done things with Pokemon Sword and Shield, that of course finding things within the code of that game that of course came to fruition. So their track record is pretty solid. Now Series M actually made a post over on Reset Era, basically talking about their recent findings, piecing a bunch of things together, and pretty much showing proof of a Nintendo Switch revision of some sort that is potentially coming very soon. Now, I'm going to be reading a lot of stuff in this video, so I don't really know what I'm going to sort of put up as overlay. You really should just be listening to most of my videos anyways, unless they're reviews, because, you know, most of the time you don't want to see my face. So this is the information coming to us from Series M. They start out by saying Nintendo is actually working on a new model with upgraded display stuff and has been for about 1.5 to 2 years. I personally believe it's 4K given the signs I'm seeing in the firmware, but that's not confirmed yet and could be wrong. The new hardware is codenamed Aula. It is using The new hardware is codenamed Aula. It is using a Mariko SoC, which means system on a chip. There's a bunch of references to it in the code. Atmosphere supports the new display already in theory. So if you know anything about Nintendo Switch stuff, it's obviously system on a chip. That's what the Tegra X1 is. And the Mariko stuff was actually sort of a revision of that Tegra X1 chip. Now we've seen that with things like the Nintendo Switch revision that we got with better battery life, because that's one of the things that the Mariko chip is actually capable of doing by allowing things like better battery life. But it obviously can be expanded upon because of things like we've talked about with the Tegra itself. Things like the Tegra X1 Plus that of course came out on various devices such as the NVIDIA Shield TV that was of course capable of things like 4K upscaling on things that you were watching and things that weren't natively done in 4K, and it's very interesting technology. The tablet itself definitely has an upgraded display. I don't know if it's 4K. Aula has firmware support for some Realtek chip that advertises itself as a 4K UHD multimedia SoC, system on a chip, too. Hence my belief it is 4K. The chip might be inside a new dock and not inside the tablet though. There's no way to tell from the firmware code yet. Now 4K is something that we have heard a lot about with Nintendo Switch revision rumors, and I still don't think it's going to be a native 4K situation, just capable of up to 4K via things like upscaling. Obviously, artificial intelligence upscaling is pretty much the future. Things like NVIDIA DLSS technology, and NVIDIA works with Nintendo, so this is pretty much reaffirming a lot of things that we have been speculating about on this channel thus far with this Nintendo Switch revision. Aula explicitly supports handheld mode. It is not docked only, that's Calcio, which seems like it's only for internal or never releasing since Calcio has no game card slot and no battery. You can check the System Boot Sys Module display code if you're curious. The new display doesn't support power management PWM. It has its own specific vendor BS I had to reverse engineer and implement a month or two ago. Mariko has a substantially better cooling Mariko has substantially better cooling and better battery life. It is a bona fide die shrink over the original generation. My best guess, pure speculation, no firmware indication in this case, is that they needed extra performance. They'll push it to higher clock rates across the board. Now, obviously, overclocking a Nintendo Switch is something that we have seen before, and it really allows for a lot better performance in games. I know people like Modern Vintage Gamer have overclocked Nintendo Switch stuff before, and it really does improve a lot of experiences in terms of things like frame rate and the ability to play games smoothly that maybe are chugging a bit on the Nintendo Switch. It's kind of weird that we haven't seen Nintendo really sort of overclock the system yet, but now it looks like that will indeed be the case with this. And another thing to take away is the fact that this is not going to be just a handheld system or a dock-only system. It will be a traditional Nintendo Switch model, which I think a lot of people were hopeful for with this Nintendo Switch revision, because I feel like that really is what makes the Nintendo Switch special. You already have the Nintendo Switch Lite on the marketplace, which is your budget entry thing. And yeah, you could just do a docked-only Switch, but the versatility of the system is what makes it so exciting. He then goes on to say, but yeah, I speculate games will be like DSi enhanced games were, or like how some games benefited from the PlayStation 4 Pro despite working on the PlayStation 4. And really, that's my biggest takeaway from this whole situation, is that this is pretty much in line with what many of us have been thinking the system is going to be. It is not going to be a replacement for the Nintendo Switch. It's not going to be a brand new system that has new games exclusively for it. It's more of just enhancing the games that are currently available on the system, and then of course having games that utilize this power in the future that will run better on the Nintendo Switch revision system versus the original Nintendo Switch model, much like we saw with the Nintendo 3DS and of course the DSi stuff. Obviously, if you create games that are specifically designed with a Nintendo Switch Pro in mind that only work on this Nintendo Switch revision, you are severely limiting the amount of people that will have access to this game. So I think making games across the whole spectrum of Nintendo Switch family of systems where it can run better on this Nintendo Switch revision definitely makes a lot more sense than creating an own library for it. Series M wraps things up by saying the following: the upgraded tablet display is an OLED screen, probably not higher resolution on tablet itself, so I guess the 4K Realtek chip is more than likely to be new dock than I thought it was. And really, I think one interesting thing that we need to take away from all of this stuff is this is pretty much in line with what we thought the Nintendo Switch revision was going to be, at least on this channel. Pretty much all of these things are things that I have been saying that I felt that this system was going to be, based on things that we had heard, based on subsequent leaks from this, and it seems like all this is now coming to fruition. A new Nintendo Switch model that will be overclocked, that is capable of running games better than it can on the current Nintendo Switch model, having up to 4K display on your television, having an OLED screen in handheld mode. These things are really going to improve the quality of life of Nintendo Switch games, make those older games look and run even better, and then new games can obviously utilize this hardware and make games even better than they are currently on the Nintendo Switch. So I think this is definitely the first sort of concrete proof that we have gotten so far of a Nintendo Switch revision. I guess there is the small chance that Nintendo could have just put this sort of stuff in the source code for people to find and then talk about as just like an April Fool's joke or something, or I guess they could just completely scratch, you know, doing a revised Nintendo Switch model, but I don't think that's a very smart thing to do, because you want the system to stay fresh, and doing mid-generation refreshes obviously is something that does work. It's something Nintendo has done in the past with the 3DS family of systems, and it looks like it's something that Nintendo is going to continue to do in the future. So let me know in the comments section down below what you guys think of all this. Are you surprised by this information? Were you hoping for something more? Or what sort of stuff you would like to see on a Nintendo Switch Pro or a Nintendo Switch revision? Because obviously, if this is going to be both a handheld and a dock system, you're going to have the whole Joy-Con things. Do you think Nintendo will improve the Joy-Cons in this revision to make them so, well, they don't drift? Because I think that would be a very good thing. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. Like I said, if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. And a couple days ago, I said something that was pretty bold. I said, it's time to put respect on the New York Knicks. And a lot of people laughed at me. A lot of people thought, you know, I was crazy, but you know, I mean, they're 5-3. They're in 5th place right now. They have a better record than the Brooklyn Nets do. The New York Knicks run New York. The Knicks are back, baby. It's time to put respect on their name. We're going to the playoffs, unlike the Giants, because the Eagles suck. And yeah, all right, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.